and that we are on time. Well, first is that the webinar is recorded as written in the application form that you all have completed. The second one is that please wait for questions at the end of each presentation. We have 2-3 minutes for questions. I know that it's not much time, but we will try to do our best to reply to your questions. You can post your questions on the chat, or you can raise your hand and ask it directly. In any case, we will record your questions, and if you cannot answer today, we will try to answer to that by either email or by reaching you out. If you have issues with connections, please do keep your camera off. If not, definitely keep your microphone off unless you're asking a question. And yeah, thank you. I hope you will enjoy this webinar, and I will give the floor to Erwin that will introduce the webinar and the agenda of today. Thank you, everybody.
All right, thank you, Davide. I'm now asking whether my screen is visible.
Yes, it is.
That is all right. So also on my behalf, good morning and thank you for joining live. For those that are joining live, also to those that are or that will watch this in the future. Thanks for watching this first webinar of Enfasys. Enfasys, short for encouraging farmers towards sustainable farming systems through policy and business strategies. So the first webinar is titled, Why do farming systems need to move towards more sustainability? Well, I'll briefly introduce the topic of today and what our objective is of the webinar today. My name is Erwin Wouters, by the way. I work at ILVO, which is short for Flanders Research Institute of Agriculture, Fisheries and Food. And I work there at the Social Science Unit. And with the Social Science Unit, we are the project coordinator of Enfasys, which is, as I said, short for encouraging farmers towards more sustainable farming systems, to policies and also private strategies. It has been our reply to a Horizon Europe call, which was called Uncovering Lock-ins and Levers to Encourage Farmers to Move to and Stay in Sustainable, Climate Neutral, Biodiversity Friendly Food Production Systems. And it is this farmers to move to and stay in that's going to be a bit central today, and actually in many of the other webinars as well, because our main goal is to first understand what prevents farmers to move to more sustainable farming systems and food production systems. And the second big objective is then to propose solutions, which could be either policies or private strategies or combinations of that can then encourage farmers to move to and stay in sustainable food production systems. The project started in September 2022, and as of autumn last year, the first results have been produced. So we thought it was a good moment now in the beginning of this year to start our webinar series. This is the first webinar. The whole series, it plans to gradually communicate and disseminate Enfasys results to our target audience, both those that join live to the webinar and those that watch it at a later moment. Today's webinar is the first in this series, and it's really an introduction to set the scene of where we ourselves were around the beginning of the project. Not with all the details, obviously. We try to keep the webinars relatively short. So we set the scene of where we were at the beginning of the project. We introduced the challenge. Why is there a project like Enfasys being funded? So why are we existing as a group? We will introduce some of the needs that Enfasys aims to address regarding policies, regarding private strategies. And at the end, I will also introduce the different elements of the project. I will also introduce the main expected results that we foresee in the future, which will be the results that in the upcoming webinars in our Enfasys webinar series, so which will be gradually then communicated and disseminated to you. The agenda for today, so you also saw that the agenda when you registered. There are a number of short presentations. I'm almost done with the first part, which is the introduction to today's webinar. I have listed the names of the partner institutes. I let the people introduce themselves personally, who they are. But after my introduction, we will listen to some a short presentation on why farming systems need to change from an environmental point of view. So what is the challenge? Why do we exist? Why does the European Commission, for instance, think that we should do this kind of research? This will be done by NIBIO, our partner from Norway. Then we will listen to some more socio-economic considerations and aspects regarding the need for change. There will be a focus potentially on young farmers, since this presentation is done by CEJA, which is also a partner in the project and which is the European Association of Young Farmers. Then I will again take over and talk a little bit about this move towards sustainability. How did we understand that when we made the structure of the project at that moment? So what does that actually mean? And hence, what kind of research did we think that we needed to do? Then we will listen to two presentations. As I said in the beginning, one of the main objectives is to provide solutions that can encourage farmers to move to more sustainability. On the one hand, through policies and policymakers. There will be a presentation about this from Germany, Humboldt University. And then another way to stimulate farmers is by changing business models, social innovations, private sector strategies. And there we will listen to someone from GAIA Greece, who will also explain a bit about that. And then I will end with a brief overview of the research activities and what the foreseen outputs and results are. And again, as I said, these results will come gradually throughout the project in the next couple of years, will be disseminated in many ways, amongst others through this webinar series. So with that, I end my introduction and I will stop sharing my screen so the next person can take over.
I don't currently see Giovanna.
Hello. Can you see me?
I can see
yes.
you, but not your screen.
I am sharing it now. Oh, let me check it again. Share.
Now something
is it now is fine?
Yep.
Yes,
yeah.
yes.
Okay,
no, it's great.
So just okay. Hello. I'm Giovanna Olmo. I'm a researcher at the Norwegian Institute of Bioeconomy Research in Norway, and short NIBIO, and I'm part of the consortium of Enfasys. So NIBIO has been assigned the opening of this webinar with the presentation about why there is this urgency in transitioning towards more sustainable farming systems. So let's have a look at it, and then we can get your feedback. So the pressing need for sustainability, we thought that could be clustered into three main groups. The first one that is relating to meeting our future needs. The second one with regards to protecting the environment, as Edwin was saying before. And then the third cluster would be with regards to the livelihoods of farmers and relevant stakeholders involved. So our future needs are mostly related to the global population growth, which is putting immense pressure on agricultural systems. So but we know now that by 2050, we will need to feed 9 billion people. And this means that the food production must increase by 70% to what is producing today. However, our current agricultural practices are unsustainable and they contribute to the consequence on our environment. So this is mainly the drive that we have for looking into this. So in order to fulfill the need for increased food production, we can see how agriculture has undergone significant production increases. It is interesting, though, to see from a scientific point of view also what has been driving the annual change in economic outputs from agriculture. And we can see that, for example, in the 60s, inputs were having the heaviest footprint. While in the last decades, this increase has been driven by different factors relating to efficiency, such as improved technology, use of fertilizers and pesticides, and better varieties of seeds. However, this growth has come at a cost, which is mainly on the environment where we're living in. So agriculture, we know, is a major contributor to climate change that is accounting for over a quarter of global greenhouse gas emissions, is occupying half of the world's habitable land, and is using 70% of global fresh water, in addition to the 78% of global ocean and freshwater eutrophication that is actually caused by agriculture. So again, this has been a push for the funding organization to look into how we can address these issues. Despite the increased efficiency of the agricultural systems, as seen before, non-renewable natural resources are depleted every day. Traditional farming methods induce heavy consequences such as deforestation, overgrazing, improper agricultural practices, and urbanization, which are contributing mainly to soil erosion and degradation. And we know that as of today, 33% of the world's soil is degraded, affecting food production and ecosystems. The overexploitation of natural resources causes habitat loss, climate change, again, pollution, and threatened biodiversity globally, impacting ecosystem and human well-being. The agriculture that is industrialized today often relies on a limited number of crop varieties and breeds that is leading to a loss of genetic diversity within agricultural systems, reducing the resilience of the system to, for example, pests and diseases, and increasing the reliance on chemical inputs to mitigate the consequences, and then leading to further resource depletion. Moreover, agriculture is a significant, as again mentioned before, consumer of freshwater resources for irrigation. Over-extraction of water for agriculture can deplete aquifers and reduce water availability for other uses. So in addition to this, the excessive use of inputs like pesticides and fertilizers to increase the production is releasing these nutrients in the environment, which affects negatively the surrounding environment, causing eutrophication. And in the specific case of nitrogen, we can see that the only consequence of over applying it is just to pollute the soil. So just to put a positive note now, traditional farming systems are also linked to greenhouse gas emissions, which is not very positive, but they account for 26% of the global emissions. But thanks to the ambitious climate targets of the EU and with the additional measures that are foreseen, it seems that the 48% of methane and the nitrous oxide, which is 31%, and the 17% of contribution of manure management will effectively decrease by 2050. So despite all the increase in production, we still see that the traditional farming system do not solve the food security issues that are currently existing worldwide. Because as you can see here, there is still severe food insecurity. And in addition to this, many farmers face also low wages and poor working conditions. And this happens, I just wanted to showcase here the case of Norway, where, for example, policies are strongly supporting farmers. And in this case, when the policies are in line with the needs, we can see that the farmers are thriving. Otherwise, there is not enough increased income for farmers to secure decent livelihoods. And this will link then to the presentations after, especially in relation to young farmers that are not finding this type of professions attractive anymore. So to conclude, the challenges that we are facing today in order to transition quickly towards more sustainable farming systems are really interconnected at different levels and require a systemic approach from global to European to local level. When it comes to the global challenges that we have seen are those related to climate changes, population growth, resource depletion, including the biodiversity loss. And the objectives are those related to the UN Sustainable Development Goals like zero hunger, responsible consumption and production, climate action, and life on land. And the only call to action that is foreseeable here is the one to transform our food systems. So when it comes to the EU level, we assist to increasing farmland degradation, water pollution, and dependence on important food with increased footprint for them. And those objectives that we need to achieve in order to address those challenges are those stated in the European Green Deal under, for example, the Farm to Fork strategy, which is a central element of the European Green Deal, setting ambitious targets for making food system more sustainable. And it emphasizes the importance of reducing the environmental and climate footprint of food production. And then lastly is the local level, where actually Enfasys is also looking at now in the case studies and the national challenges. We need to address this through national objectives that are related to sustainability strategies and agricultural policies. And then those, they need to be linked upwards towards the EU and the global challenges in order to achieve this impact that is expected. So this is our team, me and IBI, who is also here today. And I hope that this short introduction was providing you with relevant elements to explain the urgency of transitioning. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Giovanna. Thank you very much for the interesting presentation. I don't see questions on the chat or raised hands, so I believe that we can move to the next presentation that Anna will present from CEJA about the socio-economic considerations. Anna, the floor is yours. I see that you have already shared the screen.
Yes, thank you, Davide, and thank you, Giovanna, for already introducing the fact that socio-economic considerations are also very important when we speak about transition and transformation of our farming system and of the food system in general. So I'm Anna van den Moosdijk. I'm project officer at CEJA, the European Council of Young Farmers, and that's exactly what we will speak about. What are the current challenges and hurdles in the socio-economic aspects that are like kind of keeping us from transitioning and that need to be transformed to be able to access sustainability in our farming system and our food systems. So let's start. Oh, if my computer wants to. Yes, perfect. Let's start with quite some striking numbers. So there is general, quite alarming assessment when it comes to access of investment in the farming sector. And here study of 2000 on the year 2022, but published in 2023, can give us some insight in what's going on. So in the FI Compass, we see growing financing gap in the agricultural sector in the EU, and this gap has been growing, as you can see. We also can see that it is a gap that has been striking way more young farmers, and that is even increasing. So the younger generation of farmers, when they ask for a bank loan, they have a chance to be 2 to 3 times more rejected than other farmers in general. And this is even more striking when we speak about transition. We also see that there is a major investment gap when it comes to investment in green solutions. We see that 30.4% of the total financing gap of agriculture is in those greening purposes. That could be investment in technology or investments in adaptation to climate change. This is simply not met by private investment, by banking loans. And this is when we speak about transition, we need to be able to finance it. So that was what I wanted to introduce the topic with. But so we have spoken about financing, but now let's speak also about remuneration and price, which is another source that could help to finance the transition. There has been some action, legislative action on the matter. We have at EU level the EU Directive on Unfair Trading Practices, for instance, that tries to improve the fairness of repartition of profits along the food value chain. Unfortunately, as you have probably witnessed all around Europe, for those of you who are based in Europe, in the past months, well, one of the demands of the actions of farmers across Europe was to have the directive fair actually implemented, and there has been some gaps in implementation of this directive or the challenges of implementation of this directive. So this remains quite a striking issue as well. I would even add also, I don't have the numbers on me here, but a presentation that was actually given by one of our partners in the project, Philippe Barret, had like showed that profit margins of farmers across the value chain were the lowest, while they bear most of the risks when it comes to food production, and they bear a big part of the transition. So this is something that also has to be considered when we speak about transition. There is, sorry, someone is trying to call me. It's fine. So this is, when we speak about economic considerations, those are two very striking issues and lock-ins to a certain extent, I would say, that don't allow farmers to access to the transition if they cannot finance it. Also, when we speak about new practices and better practices, when it, for instance, comes to soil use, we have to also consider some aspects regarding access to land and long-term access to land. So in that regard, we know that 50% of utilized agricultural land is under a leasing contract. So departing from that, well, we don't, in a leasing contract, if they are long-term, we can have a certain perspective on the fact that the actions a farmer could undertake today would be benefiting still himself and environment in the future. But unfortunately, we see across Europe trends of land artificialization. In that regard, at CEJA, we conducted a campaign last year, Land Stories, where we collected testimonies from young farmers across Europe. And here you can see, for instance, one of the testimonies we got from Mark in Luxembourg that will lose 10 hectares to urban in a town that's near him. And that's basically, if Mark would have liked to put in place like better practices for his soil, he just sees that all these practices will be left without any benefits and consequences because artificialization has been happening, which is also quite concerning when it's hard already to put the investment in place because it's quite a shrinking space that farmers have to be able to invest in a transition. And then when efforts are not actually the land that has been where the efforts have been put on is then artificialized for other purposes, it's kind of waiting or a weight on the mental health of farmers, on also the perspectives of evolution of the farm and the perspective of still being able to farm in 20 years or 30 years or well I guess this story is quite speaking, let's say. Then when we move to more social consideration, there is still gap in access to knowledge and skills, especially when we see that climate change has been more and more demanding in adaptation, in resilience. We see challenges in knowledge and skills when we see that, for instance, there has been a decrease of subsidies for farmers' education. Also, there is still low ambitions on skills delivery in starter courses. So our farmers are not necessarily equipped by their basic education to answer those needs. Additionally, the accessibility and affordability of higher education, but also lifelong training is something that is still not fully addressed. Also, it's very disparate across European countries, and at European level, well, there have been some efforts put in place, but we are still not there, unfortunately. Also, there are suboptimal bridges with research. I would say that in Enfasys, we are an exception to this, luckily, but this is something that also needs to be addressed in the actual concrete needs on the ground that need to be addressed. And finally, when it comes to in line with having access to knowledge and having access to skills, of course, farmers cannot do it all, and they need tailored and independent advisory services. This is also something that is not the case all over Europe and definitely needs to be improved because, of course, if you have non-independent advisory services, it can add to the financial burden on the farm and actually not answer the demands when it's driven by marketing purposes, for instance. And also public advisory services don't always have the means to answer all the technical needs of farmers, and then they have to find it elsewhere. So knowledge and skills is, I think, one of the major issues that doesn't facilitate transition, that is impairing it. Then I would finish with something that we speak a lot about at CEJA when we speak about having perspective for the farming sector in the future, for also attractivity. There are a lot of challenges coming with this situation. I've already mentioned a lot of them, of course, and those are affecting directly, for instance, the mental health of farmers. CEJA is actually coordinating Erasmus Plus project called FarmRes. And in a summary report we published in March 2023, 3 out of 4 farmers that participated to a survey declared that they underwent mental health issues in the last 3 years. We also have striking numbers of suicide in the farming sector across European countries. And there are a lot of stress factors that come to bring into this. In our latest Young Farmer Late Show at CEJA, we had a young farmer also mentioning the fact that climate change was having a huge impact on her mental health. And she was saying something very striking. I remember she was saying, well, with other problems, you know that they will eventually pass. But with climate change, you don't know when it ends, and we will always have to adapt. And it's training, and especially when you see other factors that, for instance, there is a lack of availability of workforce in the agricultural sector. So when it comes to being replaced, when it comes to being helped in on the farm work, it's quite difficult to access to this. And additionally, well, of course, we know that long working hours are quite common in the agricultural sector, which come to then reinforce, unfortunately, accidents and injuries. CEJA is also participating to another Horizon Europe project called Safe Habitus. And there, one of the preliminary conclusions is that, for instance, in Ireland, or preliminary numbers, I would say, rather than conclusions, is that, for instance, in Ireland, 50% of occupational health, injuries are happening in the farming sector. So when you have numbers like this, you're also like concerned by the situation at stake. And then, of course, you have variable coverages of social insurances. So this even increases the fact that, well, if there is an availability of someone that could replace you, if you're not covered, it's becoming an additional financial burden in a situation that's not financially necessarily the best. So yeah, let's say that work-life balance and also decent livelihood and decent work conditions are also a necessary step to be addressed and a necessary issue to be addressed. That was quite a long list of challenges, but I think that it was important also to address them. And in our project in Enfasys, we also have some case studies like focalizing on it. For instance, at CEJA, we have a case study that is on short food value chains, and we are like, of course, decreasing the complexity because we are in short value chains, but then we can address maybe also some social aspects of having a decent work-life balance, because of course the farmer can not do all, and at some point there is 24 hours in a day, but you also need to sleep at night and to have the right to be replaced, the right to rest. And yeah, that was a long presentation. I hope you liked it, and I'm available for questions.
Thank you, Anna. This was indeed a very interesting presentation, and thank you for putting focus on the socioeconomic aspects of a shift towards more sustainability. There is actually, I think, a question from Giovanna.
Yeah, thank you, Anna. It was extremely interesting, and I'm very, very engaged into this. So I just wanted to ask you if you think that there could be some sort of lobbying that could be done from our side in terms of raising awareness towards the EU, because the thing is that, yes, we speak a lot about the production and the sustainability, but not so much about human factors and workload for these people, because as you say, they tend to have extreme conditions in terms of workload and working hours. So, and the injuries are going up, but there is not a lot of research done in terms of how to link, for example, in insurance schemes towards both the fact that the world is becoming more and more unpredictable when it comes to food production, and also when it comes to the workload that these people are having. So what is your take on it?
Well, of course, that's also why we are very happy that projects like Safe Habitus exist, like another project that I mentioned during my presentation, where we will have data to come forward and to policymakers and say that the CAP has recently introduced in the latest CAP social sustainability, but as things stand, it's only concerning the employed people in the farming sector.
Yes.
Unfortunately, well, that doesn't cover it all, because a large part of the farming sector is self-employed. And there we are entering the intricate situation that social policy is shared competence or not shared. It's kind of tricky because it's mostly nationally based. So I guess that's a lot has to happen also at national level, but the European level has to do something. When we speak about agriculture, you cannot leave those topics behind. And what I see more possibilities at this stage on raising awareness in the social aspects, and on maybe, and hope that maybe legislatively it will be possible to create this space. But for instance, the issues regarding fairness in the value chain, there is the European Union has the legal tools to do something, has the legal tools to do some regulation. We have not until now seen something strong. We have seen the Unfair Trading Practices Directive, but we are very concerned by the fact that it's not ambitious enough, and it puts a lot of pressure on national competition authorities that are just overwhelmed by the amount of cases they have to treat. So at some point, the European Union will have to step in if we want the situation to go in the right direction. And when it comes to banking, the EIB has been active. Actually, in 2019, there have been loan packages that were prepared for young farmers, like a program. And I think within 3 months, all the money was spent. So you could see that it was very useful at that time. And we at CEJA are in discussion to see maybe that such initiatives happen again, because of course there is a lot of public money that goes to the farming sector. But if we cannot only fund farming with public money, and if the investment partners in usual economy, like banks, don't step in, we have a major issue at stake, because then who pays for the transition?
Yeah.
Who helps to pay for the transition? That's a problem. Yeah, I
But
hope
there
my
are good
answer
examples in at least also in Spain when it comes to, for example, climate adaptation, that they have this fund for the farmers, and it is based on the farmers themselves. In Norway, we have other types of schemes, for example, in the forestry sector, where a small percentage of the income is going into a fund that then is used for research on topics that the forest owners themselves decide. So there are possibilities here, but we should have a bit more weight in terms of global results or EU results. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Joanna. Thank you, Anna. Yeah, we're running a bit behind schedule, so I will give the floor immediately to Erwin. Please, Erwin, keep mind of the time. But yes, this discussion was very interesting, and maybe we could think of having an entire webinar on this topic in the future. Erwin, the floor is yours.
Yes, I'm assuming you see my screen again.
Yes,
if not, please let me know. All right. So, well, after these two very nice presentations, I think, yeah, it would be a disservice to them, to Giovanna and Anna, to summarize that very briefly. But I think it is clear that even though a lot of improvement has been made, there are environmental reasons or environmental motivations to ask for a move towards more sustainability. But there are also socioeconomic reasons, clearly, to ask for changes and to be willing to implement changes. And in fact, these two reasons are interrelated. As in, if there are no changes made to the socioeconomic conditions, perhaps the necessary changes to the environmental conditions or environmental performance might be more difficult. In this presentation, I will try to be brief. As you have seen in the call, to which Enfasys was a reply from our consortium, there was this central term or central sentence: move towards more sustainability. And now I just want to briefly introduce you how at the start of the project, or even earlier when we designed the project proposal, a little bit what some of our thinking regarding move towards more sustainability was. By now, our thinking has not changed, but evolved, because we have already been doing 1 year of work. But this is more or less what the status in the beginning was. I have to, yeah, all right. So a move towards more sustainability, one way that has been proposed in the literature is to use the efficiency substitution and redesign framework, where efficiency means that you make more efficient use of inputs. Basically, you become more efficient in using inputs or doing more with less, which in one of the figures that Giovanna has shown has been very well achieved already by EU farming systems. Likewise, it could also mean less bad output per unit of production. An example there is that many EU farms and EU farming systems have already achieved to reduce to a substantial degree the greenhouse gas emissions per unit of production, for instance, per liter of milk or per kilogram of meat. So that's one way to move towards more sustainability, becoming more efficient. Another way in this proposed scheme is substitution, which means changing harmful inputs to less harmful inputs, changing pesticides to IPM practices, or changing pesticides to biopesticides, or substituting harmful inputs for good practices that reduce the needs for some of these harmful inputs. And then last, it is usually presented as something which typically is chronologically, although I don't think it's necessarily the case, but a redesign. And that's very big changes, a drastic redesign of the system, changing the focus on crops and animals and on which combinations of these are being produced, changing the financing system, changing marketing methods. So this has been proposed already in the 1990s as a way to characterize what moves towards more sustainability could mean. Obviously, they have relation to other concepts. When I started doing research, these two concepts were very much used: incremental innovation and radical innovation, with incremental meaning small changes to the existing system, whereas in radical innovation, it was more also about changing the system itself, which was even more clear with alternative terms like systemic innovation or system innovation. Some researchers even said that these two types of innovation worked as a trade-off, in that the more you do incremental innovations, the less, or the more you delay radical innovations. Others even say no, that it's an and story. Move towards sustainability is both incremental innovation and radical innovation, or even radical innovation could happen through a series of smaller incremental innovations. But these have been related concepts to describe move towards more sustainability. I think especially Giovanna, but I also think Anna have been using, obviously, the term transformation and transition quite a lot. Also terms that have been used a lot in both scientific and popular press, sometimes interchangeably, sometimes meaning different things, not always consistently meaning different things. Some describe transformation as the change itself and transition as the process leading towards that. Others made a distinction more in terms of how big the change is when you talk about transformation versus transition. But these are different ways that when we were making the structure of the project that we have used to think about what a move towards more sustainability is, and then what kind of research we should do to understand what prevents this move, and then how to encourage this move. Even though the efficiency substitution redesign framework has been proposed in the 90s, it's still widely used. This is an example from EFSA, the European Food Safety Authority, in their proposal on how to reach the farm-to-fork ambitions regarding antimicrobial use, which set an ambition by 2030 to reduce this by half. And their efficiency becomes reduced by setting targets, by setting rules on when antimicrobial use can be prescribed or when it cannot be prescribed. Substitution becomes replaced by considering alternatives to antimicrobials that do not cause as much antimicrobial resistance, develop new alternatives. And then redesign has become rethink, considering new farming systems, improve prevention on farms. Now, originally, the efficiency substitution redesign framework has been proposed as a way to characterize moves towards sustainability at the individual farm level. However, especially if you look at the presentation from Anna, it has become clear that because if this would have been our starting point, then this would have meant that our main unit of analysis would have been the individual farm level, and to identify what prevents individual farms and individual farmers to move towards more sustainability, and then to propose solutions to stimulate or encourage them. However, it's clear that many more actors are important to consider, the wider system actors like policies, like business actors, both up and downstream of the farmers themselves. And that there is an importance also of wider changes or changes in the wider system. And this importance actually increases even more when it is needed to really redesign systems, when just simple improvements in efficiency or substitutions whereby harmful inputs or harmful practices are replaced by better practices, when this is not yet enough and redesign is needed, it is very clear that we should not have the individual farm as unit of analysis only. And that has become very visible in our project, where we have really sort of a double way to identify what prevents the move towards sustainability and how it can then be incentivized. Where we do look in different cases, one of them which was already mentioned by Anna, in different cases which are farming systems in certain regions across EU, at the more system level, what are the more structural systemic barriers there? And at the same time, or almost simultaneously, we do look at individual farming systems, because sometimes even within the same sector, the same region, we do see large differences between farmers in terms of how far they have already moved towards more sustainability. But it has definitely these two sides, our projects as these two sides, looking at the individual level, but also more at the structural and system level. What we have already done in the project regarding our understanding of what a move towards more sustainability is to build a conceptual framework, including literature review, and to do a light touch analysis. And light should be taken literally. Sometimes the light analysis involved one telephone interview with someone who knew one of these initiatives to more sustainability very well. This was done to have a very initial identification of barriers and levers at the system and individual level, and also to make a deeper characterization of moves towards more sustainability, which even goes beyond the efficiency substitution redesign characterization, and then to achieve or to arrive at a shared understanding of moves towards more sustainability in ways that can better help us to position and frame the next activities in the project. Most of this work has more or less come to an end in the last couple of months. So it could be, or it's quite likely actually, that in one of the next webinars which we are planning or which we will plan soon, like key findings from this kind of work will be the topic in the next webinar, possibly. And I'm going to end here. I believe, well, this is not the last slide I have for today, but for this part, so I'll stop sharing my screen and then give it back to Davide, you, or immediately to Peter.
Thank you. Before going to Peter, just there is a question on the chat. I don't know if you have the opportunity of reading it or if you want to read me out loud.
Yeah, so the question is whether we have ever considered to utilize the concept of agroecology as a more sustainable farming system. If not, I assume, why did we decide against it? Well, we have not decided against it, but we have also not used it as like the only or central way to describe more sustainable farming systems, because we think there are different pathways, different ways to move towards more sustainability. Agroecology perhaps being one of them, especially at the more principal level. Agroecology, I assume, can also inform many other ways to move towards more sustainability. And in the project, well, this is a mainly socio-economic political science project, so it's not our goal to analyze how sustainable certain farming systems are versus others. It's not a natural science project. So we consider different types of moves towards more sustainability. Agroecology definitely being one of them, but not like the only characterization of what a sustainable farming system is.
Thank you, Erwin, for the reply. I hope it was satisfactory. If not, please write again in the chat. And then now we can move to Peter, that will look at the policy side.
Right. Yeah. Thank you very much, Davide. I'm trying to share my slides, and I hope you can now see them.
Yes, you successfully did so.
Okay, then I go to presentation mode. Okay, I've been asked to talk a little bit about the role of policy to stimulate the shift towards sustainability, and we have a dedicated work package on policy in the Enfasys project. So what I want, with support from Pascal Grohmann and Diane Kapken, who work on our agriculture and food policy group at Humboldt University at Berlin, to provide some general ideas that represent our perspective on the role of policy in shifting farming systems to. First of all, what's actually the task of public policy? And here we can say, well, we expect from policymakers that they select and create legitimacy for programs which use the resources of the Commonwealth, for example, taxes and the organization of the state, to pursue aims or address problems which cannot be solved through individual action, so by individuals kind of caring for themselves, through market transactions, or through voluntary cooperation. And by definition, systemic lock-ins cannot be overcome by individuals. Otherwise, farmers would opt for more profitable or more sustainable options. Obviously, we've got a lot of market failure when we discuss about the environmental externalities of many farming practices. And voluntary cooperation is not enough because, I mean, farmers need to survive. It's their livelihoods. So to a certain degree, they also need to be remunerated and compensated for their efforts. So therefore, to overcome systemic lock-ins, we need coordination and public intervention, which means it's very difficult to imagine a transition that would help us to overcome lock-ins, unsustainable lock-ins, without public policy. So the general model of transformations to which we are referring is the multi-level perspective, which has been articulated by Frank Geels and others. And most of you will know that diagram very well. At the center, we've got a social-technical regime that is very stable. Then there are broader developments beyond the control of the regime actors here at the landscape level, so that the regime might crack open, and then that could create the opportunity for niche innovations to be upscaled and be adopted in the regime. And in this broader picture, we've got three partly contradictory roles of public policy. First of all, public policies have co-evolved in the past as part of the incumbent regime, which means that the existing policies mostly contribute to stabilizing the social-technical regime. And if that regime is not sustainable and has other kind of problems that we have already listened to in the earlier presentations, then the existing policies are probably stabilizing the social-technical regime that is very problematic. So public policies need to be changed. The second role is that public policies can encourage new, more sustainable niche innovations, but they can also hinder them. For example, if regulatory prescriptions make it very difficult to bring a new innovation to the market, or just to change the way how you're organizing your farm. If you want to refurbish your stable and you're running into emission regulation so that you cannot do it, then clearly public policies hinder new innovations. And finally, what's often overlooked is that public policies can either dampen or reinforce landscape pressure. So think about the public expectations about the environmental performance of farming systems, or the expectation that farming systems reduce their greenhouse gas emissions. In the past, many farm policies have tried to insulate the agricultural sector from these broader expectations to a certain degree. And basically the promise of many farm policymakers was to the farm interest groups that it will not be so bad, and that they will be protected against these new societal demands. To the contrary, I think what's needed is that we need public policy to send signals and then create the conditions that these new societal demands can be met, and that we can respond to new challenges like climate change. Now, if we talk about public policy, I think we have to keep in mind that there are 4 key dimensions. First of all, the ideas about what good public policy actually is. Then we've got an institutional framework in which these ideas can be institutionalized. We have a range of interest groups that try to influence the policy-making process. And in the end, as the outcome of that process, we have the instruments that have been selected, and then they are implemented, often in a very complex process. Particularly if we talk about the common agricultural policy, then implementation is at the level of the member states, whereas the instrument formulation is at the European level, making that a very complex interaction. So therefore, now what is important is that we recognize that policy evolution is a non-linear process. First of all, we do not design policies on a blank space. There's always a crowded policy space. So at any point in time, there are already many, many existing policies. And these usually reflect historical compromises and power struggles of the past, which do not necessarily address the current challenges that we are facing. So these policies constantly create policy feedback, which means they create resource effects, they provide resources to certain groups, they create knowledge effects because we see which policies work and which don't work and what they actually achieve, and they create incentive effects. In particular, beneficiaries of the current policies, for example, the current farm subsidies, they want to maintain these policies, and they also learn more and more how these policies work. So therefore, it's often very difficult to get rid of existing policies because there are always some beneficiaries who have powerful positions. So therefore, new policies are often layered on top of the old ones. And that creates very complex policy mixes with many goals and many instruments. These goals and instruments embody different ideas and aims, and they also often encompass multiple levels of policymaking. I have already mentioned the example of the common agricultural policy, national and often also subnational and regional policy processes interacting. And then people also have to keep in mind the WTO rules on trade in agriculture. So taken together, these processes create an enormous potential for policy lock-in and for very high policy complexity that we need to keep in mind when we want to understand the possible role of policy to overcome unsustainable lock-ins in farming systems. So this creates 2 main challenges. The first challenge is to align the old and the new policies. So here we've got an overview over the elements of a policy mix. First of all, there are the goals, which are manifestations of cognitive assumptions and normative beliefs regarding policy purposes. And they're often cross-cutting, or they can be sectoral, and sometimes they're operationalized, but not always. Then we've got the instruments. These are the tools and techniques which are used by governments to achieve the policy objectives. And these can be regulatory, financial, informational, or cooperative instruments. And what's often not sufficiently considered is that these policy instruments need to be calibrated. So calibration are the concrete adjustments of the policy instruments setting. So for example, how ambitious is a standard? What is the premium that is being paid for an eco scheme? All these are calibrations. And calibrations can be more or less stringent, more or less specific, more or less flexible, and they can be either very immediate or delayed, or they can provide more temporal leeway, or can require specific temporal actions by the addressees. So this means that there are many dimensions of public policy, and these can be contradictory if we layer old policies on top of new ones, which means we need to assess policy mixes with regard to the coherence of the policy goals. That's the questions, are these policy goals mutually supportive? We have to look whether the policy instruments are consistent. So do they mutually reinforce or rather contradict their effects? And finally, we need to look at the congruence of the policy calibration. So does the way how the instruments are implemented actually support the goals? And to what degree are different goals actually supported? So it's often at the level of calibrations that goal conflicts are decided, and where it is decided which goals are actually given priority. The second big challenge is about legitimacy and the broader discussion of what is actually a just transition. So legitimacy is quite a complex construct. We can distinguish three basic dimensions. First, legality. To be legitimate, a policy has to be adopted through the legal democratic process that is foreseen in the Constitution, or in Europe in the Treaty on the Functioning of the European Union. We need to look whether the policy is actually accepted by those who are affected. And finally, we should consider whether there are good reasons to accept a specific policy. At the same time, we can also distinguish between input, output, and throughput legitimacy. Input means that those who are affected can actually participate and have an effective voice in the policy process. Output legitimacy refers to an acceptable distribution of burden and benefits between different groups. And throughput legitimacy means the quality of the process. Is the process transparent? Are steps building in a consistent way upon each other? Are the debates knowledge-based? And are they following concepts and understandings of a fair process? And these notions of legitimacy of public policy feed directly into the broader discussion about just transitions. And here we can distinguish, again, three different dimensions. A just transition requires adequate participation of all groups which are affected in the political decision-making process. That doesn't necessarily mean in our design process in the project, to which I will come in a second. Second, a just transition means material compensation to groups which are negatively affected. And finally, the recognition of identities which are affected by the transition. For example, if we say, well, we need a different type of animal production, then it is important to understand how traditional ways of animal production are often constitutive for the personal and professional identities of those who are involved in animal breeding and animal production. So how does this translate into our work in Enfasys? Here in our policy work package, our overall objective is to define transformative strategies for policy design and implementation to foster the shift to sustainable farming systems. And here we've set ourselves three different tasks. First of all, the co-design of policy mixes that can help to overcome lock-ins. Then second, the co-design of transformative strategies to implement these policy designs to overcome unsustainable lock-ins. And finally, we want to derive design principles and lessons learned for public policies that help farming systems to overcome unsustainable lock-ins. And just to give you an idea how we want to proceed here, the co-design processes to address the first task are planned to evolve over a series of 3 consecutive workshops with experts and stakeholders from each case study region. In the first step, we want to develop a shared understanding of the lock-ins facing the specific farming system. And then we want to formulate shared, ambitious, but feasible and clearly operationalized SMART goals for the farming system. On that basis, we want to collect possible measures and policy tools to support the desired development. And in a third step, we then combine these goals and instruments into a policy mix and assess its coherence, consistency, and congruence, and also the likelihood that the policy mix can actually achieve the goals. And if it turns out that there are problems in any of these dimensions, then we revise the policy mix if needed. For those who want to follow this webinar on the internet, here is just a slide with some conceptual background notions, which I will not read out here, but people can read the slide if they stop the video. And now I'm very grateful for your attention and look forward to any feedback. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Peter. Yes, I don't see questions right now or raised hands. I just also want to add that also the results of the co-design process and its workshops will most likely be the content of one webinar in the future, probably by next year or the year after. And now we can move to the last thematic presentation on the private sector role and needs, delivered by GAIA and by Joanna.
Yes, hello everyone. Just a few seconds to share my screen. So can you share my presentation?
We can see your screen, yes. It's just not in presentation mode, but we can see it.
Just a moment. I think now it's okay.
No, we still don't see it in presentation mode.
Maybe we will give it some time because I see it like this. Not yet?
No.
Okay, I'll try to do it again. Can you see it now?
Yes, now we can see it.
Okay. So hello everyone. I'm Joanna Kaliva from GAIA Epichirin. I'm very happy to be here in our first webinar. I work in GAIA Epichirin in the Department of EU Project Management and focusing and implementing EU projects co-funded by European Union and that are focusing mostly in rural development and digital agriculture. So I will try to be very short in this presentation because I know that the time is, we are out of schedule. But anyway, I would like to talk about the private sector and their roles and needs in order to enable more sustainability. Okay, there is a problem in. Sorry for this. No, this is more problem. I apologize. Okay. Is this okay? You can see it still in my presentation?
We can see it is not in presentation mode, but maybe it's better to have it like this so that you can go through the presentation in an easier way.
Okay, thank you. I really don't know what this happened. Anyway, so during September 2017, there was implemented Sustainable Development Agenda that was agreed to adopt the development of sustainability, and was adopted by United Nations. So this agenda consists of 17 sustainable development goals and many targets, and it expresses the goal, the global goal, in order to take urgent actions to save the planet, the climate, and includes goals that balance the three basic dimensions of sustainability development, which are the economic, social, and environmental. So in these regards, the involvement of private sector is of course considered essential, and because it is one of the key actors that could enhance the Sustainable Development Goals implementation process.
Joanna, sorry, the slides are not moving. That means that probably you're seeing it on your screen on presentation mode. My suggestion is that you go out to the presentation mode and you just try to have the presentation from the normal standard screen.
Okay.
Yes, exactly like this. Thank you.
Okay. So sustainable agriculture is, of course, crucial for addressing the global challenges within the agenda, such as food security, climate change, and environmental degradation. By enabling more sustainable agriculture, requires, of course, the active involvement of all the actors within the sector, and of course, with the private sector, which is one of the actors that can address many challenges and plays various roles in achieving this sustainability. So the main key actors within the private sector have been identified as some categories, which are farmers, agricultural advisors, agri-technology providers, food processor companies and retailers, and agricultural input companies. So the farmers is the most important actor within this agri-food sector and considered a private actor. And its role in achieving sustainability is, of course, fundamental, because their activities and their production methods have the major impact in environment, and of course they influence social sustainability. So after identifying their needs and after addressing them, they will be able to succeed, and sustainability as these needs, the addressing of their needs is the first step to move towards more sustainable farming system. So some of the basic needs that have been recognized, of course, is financial support. We all know that farmers need financial support and incentivize in order to balance some profit losses that derive from the implementation of sustainable agricultural practices and the way to move towards there. And of course, there are some other losses that derive from implementation of new technologies helping sustainability. They need, of course, access to sustainable and affordable and environmental friendly inputs in regards of seeds, fertilizers, pesticides, machinery, that all this supports the implementation of practices, as well as they need, of course, access to respective technology, such as systems, irrigation systems, renewable energy solution, smart farming and precision farming tools, and other mobile applications. And of course, they need to be educated and they need to participate in educational programs in order to acquire the necessary skills that are needed to implement sustainable practices. And what is mentioned by farmers in general is that they need to have access to market, to that kind of market that rewards them with fair prices for their products that have been produced under conditions, under sustainable production practices. And this will motivate them in order to maintain these practices. Another actor within this private sector is, of course, agricultural advisors and agronomists, which role is very important, of course, because they are promoting sustainability, and they are the one who support and guidance farmers in order to implement these practices. But of course, also, they need to be constantly educated and training in order to be aligned with all the latest research, innovative agricultural practices, and of course, regulated frameworks. They need, of course, to develop their skills and expertise to provide a certain and accurate guidance to farmers according to their needs. And furthermore, they need to develop their communication skills because they need to effectively engage with farmers and other actors within the agri-food sector to build a trust relationship between them because they are the ones that have the responsibility to communicate complex informations to less informed stakeholders and to influence their production practices. Agri-technology providers, of course, is one of the major actors because they provide and they can develop, of course, innovative tools to implement and to help and assist sustainability. But of course, they need to have funding for research and development activities that focuses on these kind of developments and technology and innovations. And to do so, they need to have access to accurate agricultural data and information because they need to assess the sustainability of farming practices, to monitor environmental indicators, and so to make informed recommendations to farmers. Furthermore, they need to have collaborations with actors within the sector, such as farmers, agricultural cooperatives, research institutes, in order to understand the needs and the challenges of the sector and to co-design with them solutions and, of course, to develop technological tools that meet sustainability demands. And of course, they need to have and to implement methodologies that assess and evaluate the effectiveness and the impact of these sustainable agricultural interventions, because they need to have them in order to continuously improve their sustainability efforts. Food processor companies and retailers is one of the major actors within the private sector. They have a significant role in achieving sustainability because they influence the whole supply chain practices, the consumers' choices, and the market demands. So by addressing their needs and their challenges, we can enhance implementation of sustainability in agriculture. So they need to implement sustainable sourcing policies that prioritize products produced under sustainability methods and which are environmental friendly and socially responsible practices. Furthermore, transparency and transferability throughout the whole supply chain is of course required, because through this they can verify the sustainability of agricultural products, and this is something that is necessary to promote them. Of course, furthermore, they need to have a kind of certification systems in order to provide accurate and assurance to consumers, so to promote the trust within the production of sustainability products. Moreover, the development of sustainable agricultural products, of course, requires the respective demands in markets, so retailers somehow they can create this kind of demands. I mean, they need to have some requirements from consumers in order to produce this kind of products, agricultural products. So some promotional and informative campaigns, and of course training actions towards both consumers and general public that aiming at raising awareness both in terms of environmental and health security is basic and necessary in order to develop this kind of market. Lastly, agricultural input companies is of course considered very important, because these companies create and provide products such as farm seeds, fertilizers, pesticides, and to farmers that so they need to create this kind of inputs that are environmental friendly, and to produce fertilizer, pesticides that requires less chemical use, or to create to provide seeds that are pest and disease resilient, and of course require less use of natural resources. But to do so, they need, of course, to invest in research and development activities. And furthermore, they need, of course, to be trained, and to train, of course, farmers to appropriate use this kind of innovative, let's say, products. So that's all for me. I believe that it was interesting, even though some of these aspects may be already analyzed from my partners below. Thank you.
Thank you so much. As we are over our scheduled time, I will give the floor to Erwin for closing the webinar and providing last information about Enfasys next steps. Erwin, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you. I think, Joanna, you still need to stop sharing, otherwise I cannot share my own last couple of slides. Yep. All right. For the sake of time, I will be as short as possible here, even though I have maybe too many slides to be short. But I just want to give a very brief overview of the research activities with all this background and with these ideas that we have just presented you, what then the concrete research activities are going to be and the expected results. I'll skip a number of things. I believe that as soon as we make the webinar available online, we will also be able to make the slides available, and there you can find more details. Otherwise, I will keep you busy for too long. Yes, so just the details. As I said, Horizon projects, it's 48 months. The budget is 4.5 million euros. And this was really one of the many project calls which fitted very much into the Green Deal and in the farm to fork ambition, meaning stimulate a just and robust transition to sustainable and productive and climate neutral and biodiversity and very resilient farming systems. And this particular call really is asking for both policies, public strategies and private strategies, which have been, or are ideas regarding that have been introduced just by the two previous presentations, and strategies that could build on existing levers and stimuli in food systems and farming systems, but also that could remove lock-ins and barriers. These are the partners. Yeah, I'm not going to read again for sake of time all of them, but we have partners in several countries across the EU present in the consortium, and from a number of these partners you have seen presenters today. In next webinars, I assume there will be other people that will introduce themselves to you. Also important to mention, we have two so-called sister projects that are doing research on the same call as we are doing, and these are Visionary and Beetles. I have just listed their websites here. I encourage you to go there if you have not come across these two projects yet. And through the website, I'm certain you will find various ways to follow these projects as well. They will no doubt also produce interesting results. And in the future, we might organize some of these type of activities, online webinars, also jointly with one or both of these sister projects. Just very quickly, the 6 key pillars, which are more or less also chronological stages in the process, is first the scoping and framing. I already talked about this earlier. That's why we try to scope and frame what moves towards more sustainability are by doing a literature review, by doing a very quick scan of up to 160 cases to really see and identify and investigate what is going on, what is out there across the EU in terms of initiatives towards more sustainability. Then we have a pillar in our project which is about understanding. That's also something I already talked about. That's really understanding what prevents farmers to move towards more sustainability. On the one hand, from a very systemic point of view, the structural systemic barriers. On the other hand, from an individual point of view, what at the individual farm and farming system, farmer level, by the way, could prevent a move towards more sustainability. We try to combine this knowledge from both the systemic point of view and individual point of view in what is called theories of change. Theories of change, they inform us where we need to make changes to the system. What kind of levers that our public policies and our private strategies should use in order to remove lock-ins and effectively stimulate a move towards more sustainable farming systems. And several of these interventions will then go into a testing phase where we also want to provide experimental evidence on the possible effectiveness of these policy instruments, private strategies, systemic changes to actually provide a positive encouragement to more sustainability. And this will be then used in a stage where we try to design and fine-tune solutions, also together with local and EU-level stakeholders, including, but not only policymakers, on how the findings of our projects can then be really turned into very concrete solutions, such as policy mixes, business strategies, social innovations. And then we have a pillar which actually runs throughout the projects where we try to achieve as much impact as we can, amongst others by recording and broadcasting some of these webinars. So that's that pillar, achieving impact, groups all our activities to communicate and disseminate to a wide targeted audience what our results have been. Davide, I'm going to stop here. I'm just going to tell people what else is there in the slides. As soon as you have access to the slides, I will just show One example, so here we have the different work packages. It's project language from now on, where there is a short summary of what the research activities are that are going to be done there, and then a short summary of what the expected results are. Expected results which will come throughout the project and which will be disseminated in various ways, scientific papers, policy briefs, but also in this series of webinars. And I'm going to stop here. There is 2 such slides for every work package group of activities, but I'm going to give it back to you, Davide, to close the webinar. And on my behalf already, thanks so much for joining in, for those that are here, and for those that watch this later, thanks for watching.
Yes, and thank you to all the presenters for the interesting presentations. As we said several times throughout the webinar, this is only the first of a long series of webinars that will take place in the next 2.5 years. We welcome you to be present in the next webinars as well, and to check the recording of these webinars on our website. As well, you can follow Enfasys on the project social media such as LinkedIn and Facebook. And thank you again, everybody, for joining today, and hopefully we will see you again soon. Thank you.
Bye.